Hello everyone and welcome back to Tactics Board. It's a big one for Norwich City this weekend. They face bitter rivals Ipswich Town in the East Anglian derby and a game that possibly could define their season. As I said, it's a really big one, but of course the tactics are important, and that's why here on Tactics Board I'm going to take you through the predicted 11 that I think Liam Manning will choose for the game. Then we're going to come on to Ipswich, a really interesting team actually tactically, and how they might fare and how the game will likely play out as a result. And then I'm going to discuss Jose Cordoba, who I think has been quite a controversial player for Norwich over the last few weeks, back in the team for Wednesday's loss to Jose Cordoba, and I think has split opinion a little bit, but tactically I feel like he kind of changes them as a team. Whether that's for better or for worse, we'll come on to, but I'll discuss that a little bit later. We're going to start with the team that I think Manning will pick for Sunday's game. So I've gone for Vladan Kovacevic in goal, with Jack Stacey at right back, Kellen Fisher at left back, Jakov Medic and Harry Darling at centre back, with Pelle Matson and Kenny McLean at the base of midfield, Oscar Svartau on the left, Jovan Makama on the right, and Ante Cianats behind Josh Sargent up front. I've gone with one or two changes from that West Brom game, but ultimately I think when you listen to how pleased Liam Manning was with that performance, he won't make loads of changes. I think most of those that I've gone with have been based on kind of the fact that it is a derby. I think there are questions maybe over that centre-back partnership. Obviously, I said Jose Cordoba has been a very divisive figure so far, but I think he'll be dropped for this one just because you look at the elements of the game. It doesn't feel like it will be similar to West Brom, really. Obviously, Norwich are going away from home, so there's not as much onus on them to go and attack as much, and I think when they're going to be probably defending their own box for a lot of it, trying to make sort of last ditch blocks and tackles and save goals in that way, I think Medic has a much better instinct for that sort of thing than Cordoba. Obviously you lose a little bit of pace, and if the ball goes in behind, then Norwich are going to have to hope that Kovacevic and Darling combine pretty well to deal with that. So I think that's where Medic maybe has his weaknesses, but you look at the physical battles of a derby, they suit him. You look at the fact that Ipswich, to be honest, are quite significant favourites, and it kind of favours him and his strengths in the box. So I think he could well go with Medic in there at centre-back, and for similar reasons in terms of the derby and the physicality and the toughness of the game, I've got Kenny McLean in midfield. Manning obviously has spoken over the last few press conferences really about a back injury that McLean is having to deal with, something they're kind of managing, and McLean is still in a little bit of pain by the sounds of things, having to almost be nursed from game to game. But you look at this one, the magnitude of it, the fact that it's a game he's played in before. I think he's the sort of player that teams really, really want, especially in these sorts of derbies and in these sort of tense atmospheres and games. McLean has obviously played in very important games, several very important games before in his career, so he knows what it's like, and he can probably help some of his younger colleagues who haven't experienced the derby through it as well. So I've gone for McLean in there, and Norwich just kind of hoping that he's okay in that game. And then in the front line, I've gone with a couple of changes because I think you look at Jovan Makama, and surely his skills are ideal for this sort of game. I don't really want to see Norwich smashing it forward and just winning headers and lumping it long and playing in that way. But obviously away from home, you'd expect them to do it a bit more than they did at home against West Brom. Obviously against Stoke, that was how it looked a lot of the time, and whether that was by design or not, when they struggled to progress the ball, the long ball forward to Makama was what they went to, and actually it was relatively successful at times. I think if you can get the ball towards his head, he's really good in the air. He wins a lot of those flick-ons. He can combine with Josh Sargent, and he can also kind of get you up the pitch, because although he might not be able to create something with his first touch or instantly spark an attack, he can just keep the ball up there for you, keep the defenders away from him, and kind of just sustain attacks in that way if Norwich are struggling to progress the ball through obviously what is a very good Ipswich team going into this one. So I've gone for Makama also for kind of the dynamics of the game, and then I've got Ante Cianats behind Josh Sargent because Manning has been impressed with him, or he was impressed after West Brom. I spoke to Manning actually the day after at his pre-Ipswich press conference, and he praised Seaman's performance, said that he felt it was a step in the right direction after what's clearly been quite a tough season for him so far. I think Seaman brings a bit of that physicality. He's clearly got an eye for a big moment, and the talent to produce that at times with kind of his ability from long range, with sort of shooting and the passes that he can slide through from those areas. So I definitely don't think it's been a very good start to the season for Seaman. I've said that a lot of times on Tactics Board, but we know how much Manning likes him. And also, to be fair, he is talented, even if he hasn't shown that particularly regularly over the last few weeks, really. Even if that West Brom game was a little bit of a step up in terms of performance, certainly should have scored late on. But I think Manning was encouraged, and I could see Manning chucking him back in for this one, given he is a player who Manning clearly rates, and it's a big game for Norwich. The only other discussion really is left back, and obviously Lucian Mahovo came on in that West Brom game, looked really good, whipped a great ball onto Makama's head, actually, that he'll be disappointed he didn't score, but Manning did say he was blowing even after that period of time on the pitch, and obviously he's been out for 7 months, so I think chucking him in from the start against Ipswich feels unlikely. I think Callum Fisher's done okay. Obviously there are the balance issues that you always have when you have a right-footed left-back or even a left-footed right-back, but I think Fisher's done pretty well in the circumstances, and there are probably worse things when you consider this left-back injury crisis that Norwich have had. But whatever Manning does, it will be an interesting team selection, and of course we'll learn more about that on Sunday morning. On to Ipswich then, and a side that are actually really interesting. I think when you look at the players at their disposal now, it's a very different team to what it was the last time Norwich played Ipswich, of course on the way to their second consecutive promotion after they'd come up from League One. I think the way that I'd characterise the two teams is that this one has certainly the better players, but that one was maybe a better team at the time that Norwich faced it. Now obviously you look at the players that Ipswich have, some of the players they've signed, and it feels like eventually they probably will become as good as that other team that got promoted from the Championship to the Premier League. But right now I think Norwich find them at a time when they're still kind of getting used to each other. I don't think they're as fluid in their movement as maybe they were sort of towards the start of Kieran McKenna's time in charge, but they can produce much better individual moments. They've got players like Jayden Philogene, Jack Clark, who can come into positions sort of outside the box and create chances really easily, score fantastic goals and cause you problems even if tactically you're spot on. So I think Norwich on an individual level need to be really good. Their man marking needs to be really good, and part of the reason why that's so essential is that Ipswich are actually really good at rotating. They look very different formation wise in possession to out of possession. They get the fullbacks forward, particularly Leif Davis, into those positions, and the striker can drop deep, the wingers go beyond him. George Hurst very good at doing that. So the players need to be ready for players to pop up in different positions, to maybe switch markers, and that communication needs to be good, which I think can be tough sometimes when Norwich have made as many changes as they have. Of course, Ipswich not the only ones in that boat, but it does feel to me like when you consider those problems for both teams, that it's going to be a game that's even more likely to be decided on individual moments than your average derby, which certainly usually is anyway. I mean, you look at the last time Norwich went to Portman Road, not their best performance. They weren't absolutely terrible, but ultimately what earned them a point that time was a fantastic performance from Jonathan Rowe. 2 goals in that one, 2 really good individual goals as well. And it feels like that probably will be where the game will be decided. I think you look at that factor, and that's maybe where the worry comes in for Norwich, because even though they've invested so heavily in their squad, not quite as heavily as Ipswich, but they've invested heavily by Championship standards, they don't have that many stars who you really feel can step up and produce that moment. Seaman might be able to produce that moment once in every sort of 10 or 15 games. Makama, I suppose, has a couple of times already, but apart from that, not too many players who can step up into that role. The only one who really you'd say you're likely to get a good individual performance out of on a regular basis is Josh Sargent, who obviously has shown that consistency. 4 games without a goal now, but I think if you asked Ipswich fans, they'd probably say that he was the player they were most scared of. And Sargent will try to make that count by at least getting on the score sheet once at Ipswich. But I do think those individual performances are going to be really, really important, as well as Norwich being able to rotate their defenders, being able to react quickly when Ipswich players pop up in different positions, because that's a lot of how they create chances and how they're effective sort of across the front line. So it'll be interesting to see how Norwich cope with that kind of offensive side of things, or that defensive side of things, you know, when Ipswich are attacking. One player who I didn't have in my predicted 11, you know, in that sense is Jose Cordoba. Of course, played against West Brom, and I actually thought he was okay. Obviously, he was kind of at fault for the goal, which I think is what a lot of people have focused on. Should have cleared the ball a little bit better. I think there's responsibility on Kellen Fisher and Vladan Kovacevic as well, because you know, the cross comes in too easily, and then Kovacevic probably should hold on to it when he just pushes it out. But Cordoba basically just plays it straight into Josh Madger's path when he had the chance to clear it, and that's where kind of his weakness is. That's why for this sort of game, I think Cordoba maybe isn't best placed to play, because he's not quite as good as, you know, those quick reactions, at stopping shots, at avoiding mistakes, at doing kind of the, I was going to say the basics, that feels harsh, but that kind of is the truth with Jose Cordoba and his kind of style of play. It feels like when it's reactive, he's not particularly good, even though there were a couple of decent blocks and things against West Brom. I think what his strength is running in behind, and when he knows what's happening, when he's got a bit of time to kind of engage in a battle with a striker. I think we've all seen his pace, and that was a big part of why Norwich brought him to the club. He's also got that physicality, so he can kind of lever people off the ball, and he looks at ease when he does that, really. I think he's very good at kind of preventative defending rather than reactionary defending. And if you want to be an attacking team, that's really important. So I think with a performance like it was against West Brom, where Norwich pressed higher, they were more aggressive, they had more territory and controlled the game a lot better, created more chances than they have in any other game this season for me as well. I think having Cordoba in there, or someone like him, is really important, because you can afford to press high. The players in front of the defence know that they can push forward, because if the defence is left exposed, they've got somebody who can go and recover in Cordoba. He can leave big spaces behind him, because ultimately that race that encourages for the opposition team, the space it affords them to just knock the ball in behind, Norwich are actually likely to profit from that, because they'll do that, they'll be encouraged to do that, and then they've got a defender like Cordoba who's very good at sweeping up behind them. But of course, not every game you can make like that, particularly with Norwich at the moment and the kind of form that they're in. I don't think they'll be able to do that against Ipswich. So I'm not sure this really would suit Cordoba particularly well. Again, obviously there are weaknesses that Medic has as well, but I think Medic and Darling probably is the best pairing for this Ipswich game. But I just think going forward, if Norwich want to be proactive and if fans want to see that, then maybe Cordoba right now is the answer. And you can say that they should get someone better, that you're not happy with the level of mistakes, and they are maybe fair criticisms. But right now, with those players in the squad, I think he's the best option to do that. And also, he's obviously left-footed, the only left-footed centre-back they've got there, really. So if they want someone to provide that balance, and Liam Manning's spoken about that a lot, then I think Cordoba can provide that really well. But again, it's just about cutting out those mistakes. But yeah, it's a topic I've seen discussed a lot over the last few days, so I thought we'd just discuss it on Tactics Board going into this Ipswich game, which of course we'll have covered across our channels. Go to pinkun.com/subscribe if you haven't already, and you'll have access to all of that content. Let's hope that it's got a positive feeling to it after Norwich extend this 16-year unbeaten run against Ipswich. See you after.